When building a computer for a client or for someone else, there are a couple key pieces of information to keep in mind. Your build is going to be affected by two main things. One, price, and two, purpose, or what it needs to be used for. If a computer needs to be used for advanced photo and video editing, for detailed 3D rendering, or for high-intensity graphics gaming, a higher budget will be needed to accommodate for faster and better parts. If a computer is only needed for basic documents and internet browsing, it will be able to be built cheaper and need much less processing power. Sometimes your build might have other specific requirements, like a large amount of storage space or a silent computer, which will also impact which parts are used. Usually a computer build will all revolve around a specific part. This could be a CPU that you want to use, or a GPU that you really want or need. For CPUs, there are two main companies that make these chips. These are AMD and Intel. The main part to picking this device is how many cores it has, and the speed that it can process information. More cores generally mean more processing power. The other number on the CPU is the gigahertz, which is how fast it can process this information. The higher the number, the faster it can process information. Based on the CPU that you have, you'll have to pick a motherboard to help support that CPU. Each CPU is going to have a socket chipset. This is the code that tells what type of CPU the motherboard can handle. You must make sure the CPU socket chipset and the motherboard chipset match. Your motherboard will also only be able to handle a certain type of RAM or memory. It might have 2, 4, or more slots for these memory sticks. You will need to match the type of memory with what the motherboard can handle. You do not need to fill all the memory slots on a motherboard, but you can. More gigabytes of RAM will mean more processes can run at the same time. Often, this is a key difference between some budget PCs and a higher-end PC. Here are a few optional things to add to your computer depending on your needs. A GPU. This is a dedicated device for graphics that would be needed for a higher-end computer. There are cheaper or more expensive GPUs, depending on the budget and how high-end you need to go. These usually plug into the PCI Express slot on your motherboard. This would be needed for a gaming enthusiast's computer, or for a computer that would need to handle intense visuals, like photo or video editing. A disk drive or optical drive. This is optional and can be added if you're going to need to play discs. You can get basic drives that read and write CDs and DVDs, or more advanced drives that also work with Blu-ray discs. A hard drive. Your computer will need a hard drive to store information, but what type and what size hard drive depends on your computer build needs. A regular hard drive is for a more budget PC or used when large storage size is needed, while a faster SSD is a bit pricier and stores less data. You can even have a regular hard drive and an SSD to complement each other. Cooling. Your computer and case will need basic cooling to keep everything at the right temperature, but if you have more high-end pieces, you'll need more advanced cooling. For a silent build, you can also explore liquid cooling, but will need to make sure your other parts are also compatible. The last two things in your build are the case and the power supply. The power supply you need will depend on how powerful the devices are in your computer. A budget PC can usually get away with 330 watts of power. A normal build should need 500 watts, and a very high graphical computer needs would be even as high as 1000 watts. Finally, you will need to choose a case for your computer. The most important part about choosing a case is to make sure it's big enough to fit the motherboard and power supply that you have chosen. Other considerations for a case would be if it needs certain fans and airflow, or if it needs to be silent, or even if you want a case with special lights and windows in it. Once all of these pieces are assembled, you will have the hardware done for a custom-built computer.